So this movie is like the film equivalent of one of those sneaky hot sauces where like you eat the wing and it's done and you're just sitting there and then the sauce kicks you right in the nuts. Welcome back, everybody. I'm Jake, the Scary Story Guy, and especially welcome to those of you who are new here. I know a few of you have found this channel recently thanks to some TikTok narrations of my story, so glad to have you. And today, in preparation for the upcoming Ari Aster film, Beau is Afraid, we're going to continue our exploration of this sort of new brand of horror. I've heard it called elevated horror before. It's a brand that's pretty artsy, often too maybe metaphorical or too weird for some people, but I think it also prioritizes craftsmanship and artistic achievement over, some of the cheap tricks that the genre has become known for over time. And as such, I think many of the best horror films to come out over the last decade have belonged to this different class of movie. I reviewed Hereditary and Midsommar, both Ari Aster films, last week. I hope to get around to talking about The Witch sometime soon. But today we're going to talk about the film that arguably kicked off this movement back in 2014, Jennifer Kent's feature debut, The Babadook. This is an Australian film with a very small budget, only $2 million, and while it didn't set any box office records, it did okay, but it's enjoyed a pretty successful career on streaming services in the intervening years, and has sort of become known as a cult classic. The Babadook's real success, though, I think, came in its critical response. People really saw something in this movie, some emotional depth, maybe, that I think really belied what they had come to expect about the horror genre, what you're gonna get when you go see a movie like this. We don't have a ton of jump scares here. There's not an over-reliance or even a reliance at all on gore. It's just a deeply disturbing and deeply compelling film. The Babadook stars Essie Davis as a single mother who is struggling, let's say, to raise the most annoying child in the world. I have all the respect in the world for parents. I plan to become one myself someday. And as a former difficult child myself, I almost hesitate to say this, but the first half hour of this movie will make you want to snort birth control. I mean, this kid is an absolute nightmare. And Essie Davis is just off the charts good in her portrayal of this woman who, we're sympathetic to right off the bat because we can tell that she is just so clearly on the last threads of her rope. She starts the movie almost saint-like, actually, the depths of her patience, but as the movie goes on, it's not just her patience that wears thin, it's her sanity. She's not sleeping, she gets no help from anyone, not even her own sister. And add to that the fact that her husband is only dead because he died in a car crash speeding to the hospital to take her to go give birth to her son. So she's basically the prime candidate to become the next mom who snaps and offs her kid. Things really start to spiral when she reads her son a bedtime story one night called Mr. Babadook. And she's never even seen this book before. Her kid just pulled it off the shelf. And it's one of those pop-up books where you open it and like the image kind of lifts off the page. And as she turns the pages, the story gets more frightening, more sinister. Finally, she shuts it like, okay, enough of that. But it's too late because her son is now obsessed with the Babadook, saying things, oh, he's in the house, he's out to get us, that sort of thing. And I've got to say, from a pure horror perspective, this book is probably the thing that works best in the entire movie. It's so well done, the illustrations, it's damn creepy. And it's one of those props that the filmmakers really need to nail in order for the movie to feel like it works. And with some of these more artsy horror films, you might be forgiven for asking, metaphor, craftsmanship, whatever, is it actually scary? Well, the director of The Exorcist, William Friedkin, said, "I've never seen a more terrifying film." Now, I wouldn't necessarily say that. I don't find The Babadook quite as scary as some people have said, but it does have a way of sticking with you. Like I said, one of those sneaky hot wings where it's like, you're gonna be sitting with what just happened for quite a while. And it's really impressive what Jennifer Kent was able to create here despite what's a clear lack of resources. I mean, there are many times in the movie where like, it's obvious that you're not seeing the creature because they didn't have the budget to show it. But it doesn't really take away from anything. In fact, I would say that some of the more amateur seeming elements of this film almost add to the perception that, we're watching a woman who doesn't really have it together. She's just kind of struggling to stay afloat. Her life is not polished or crisp. And so it kind of makes sense that this movie might feel the same way. I highly recommend this movie. It is both thoughtful and thought-provoking. And I do want to talk about some of the angles, that the ending takes, some of the theories that people have come up with, but I will save that for the spoiler section that will come in just a minute. For now, I'll simply say that The Babadook is one of the best horror films of the last decade. It is genuinely creepy, and it is carried by, I think, one of the great horror performances maybe ever. Yeah, I'm gonna give the Babadook 4.5 stars out of 5. Okay, let's talk about that ending now. I think a lot of people were put off by or maybe confused by the ending of this movie. We've kind of become conditioned to get something at the end of these haunting movies, and we don't get it here. The monster, the Babadook, is not defeated, exactly. It becomes intimidated by the mother such that it flees to the basement where she locks it and traps it, and will occasionally go visit it to bring it food and to kind of just check on it, keep it under control. And I think this reveal is where the movie shifted for people, like, oh, it's a metaphor. I think some folks just prefer a straightforward movie, right? The monster's a monster, and it either gets defeated or wins and kills everyone at the end. And that's fair. You know, not everyone wants their monster to ultimately turn into a poignant examination of an archetypical Jungian shadow figure. I get it. But, you know, what better representation of repressed grief and bitterness? What better way to depict the impulse to harm your own child than a vicious monster creeping through the halls of your home? I think one of the successes of this movie is it really lets you inhabit the headspace that this woman is in, because, like, you're trapped with her kid too, right, as the viewer. And so, you know, while you would obviously never condone her doing anything to her child, it wouldn't exactly come out of nowhere to you if she did. You're like, I mean, I get it. So, you know, when the mother gets possessed by the Babadook and starts chasing her kid around the house with a knife, it actually becomes more frightening if the Babadook isn't actually real, which is my personal interpretation of the film. I think that's supported by quite a few details in the film. But it's cool because having the Babadook means you get all the benefit of how freaky supernatural horror imagery can be, while at the same time not letting your viewer fall back on that kind of safe place of, oh, it's a monster and monsters aren't real. Because this monster is real, right? We see headlines about parents who snap all the time. And this kind of makes you ask what's going on in the heads of these parents, right? What circumstances brought them to that point? And an even scarier question, if you're in the mood to ask it of yourself, what would those same circumstances do to me? And this interpretation of the movie, in my view, actually makes her son a lot more sympathetic, because despite his galling behavior, at the end of the day, he truly loves his mother and always believes in her, even when she's more monster than mother. And ultimately, the opening line of the pop-up book and the tagline of this movie proves to be true. You can't get rid of the Babadook. The whole point of Jung's shadow theory is there's this horrible capacity for darkness inside you, and you can't get rid of it. And the attempt to ignore it, to push it under the rug, just repress it and pretend it doesn't exist, that is maybe the worst possible way of dealing with it. Another great line in the book, right? The more you deny me, the stronger I get. Far better to come to grips with these dark sides of yourself so that you can understand them deeply and keep them, you know, safely tucked away in the basement, under control. Because at the end of the day, the mom didn't need an exorcism or holy water or to defeat the Babadook physically in order to gain that control. She just had to stand her ground and confront the damn thing. Damn, do I need to give this movie 5 stars? Okay. Anyway, that's all for today. Stay tuned, as always, for more Scary Story content coming soon. We've got a few pretty solid horror movies hitting theaters this month. And in the meantime, thank you for watching this video, and here's hoping you survive to see the next one.